Okay guys, so this is part 2. Now here we have some more advanced problems. Do not forget guys that you are responsible for each built-in function, okay, that we talked about in these problems. So start by problem 3. Here the objective of this problem is to count the number of failing grades. This is a very important problem in which you have to count the number of failing grades. So if this is the objective, basically I should need some other inputs. That's why we will assume that we have 10 grades. Okay, so we have 10 grades and we should count the number of failing grades such that this failing grade is 70. So if my grade is less than 70, then this means that I failed this course. Now here we will assume that these grades are ranging between 40 and 100, which means I cannot have a grade that is greater than 100 or less than 40. Now in order to provide this, in order to provide that all my grades are lying in this interval, I should use a built-in function that is called rand_i. The difference between rand and rand_i is that rand will give me all the numbers between 0 and 1. Now rand_i has an additional input, which is the first one. This first input will specify the maximum, or will specify the maximum number, yes, that can rand_i reach. Which means here, if I use rand_i 60, 10, 1, this means that rand_i will give me a matrix of 10 times 1 size. So the size of this matrix is 10 rows, 1 column, with a maximum number of 60, which means all the numbers will lie between 0 and 60. So rand_i, I max mn, gives me a random matrix of m times n size where the numbers range between 0 and I max. And do not forget guys that if you are using rand_i, your answer will be different than the answer of your colleague. So each time you run your code, you will have different answer. Now here guys, in order to provide that all my grades are between 40 and 100, I will use this command. Look, I have used 40 plus rand_i 60, 110, which means that my grades are now between 40 and 100. Why? Because in fact rand_i 60 will give me the numbers between 0 and 60. So if I add 40, the numbers will be between 40 and 100. Now what about the solution here guys? Of course, I should first define the number of grades. I should define the failing grade. I should define the grades matrix or array here. And I should define a counter as 0. And this counter will be used to count all the number of failing grades. Of course guys, here I have a condition inside my loop. However, this does not mean that I should use while. Even if I have a condition, now this condition is not the condition to stop the loop. It is a condition to count the number of failing grades. So since grades, guys, as I said in the previous PowerPoint, since grades is an array, of course guys, 4 will be what? Will be on the index of this array as I did here. So for k is equal to 1 to the length of grades, if grades of this k, which means if the element at this index k is less than c, then I should add 1 at this counter. And then I will end my if, and do not forget to end your for. Of course, I can use find without any need of any loop. And now, find is a very powerful built-in function. So you can see here, if I have to use find, I should say find of the grades that is less than C, and this find will give me what? It will give me the indices of the elements that are less than C. Now how to find their number? how to count them. Since find will only give me the index of the numbers that are less than C, I can find their number by using lengths. So the number of failing grades will be length of find of grades that is less than C, and then I can print out my answers, the answers of the loop and of find, and you can see, guys, that you will have the same answer. Look here, these are the grades. So the number of failing grades is 7 basically. So you can see, guys, that the loop will give you 7 and find will give you 7. And remember, guys, you will not have the same answer because we are using print I, which is a random function. Now, the most important problem among all these problems is problem 4, because in this problem we'll be using for and while to find what? To find the factorial of a number n. For example, the factorial of 3. I know that the factorial of 3 is what? 3 times 2 times 1, which is 6. The factorial of 4 is 4 times 3 times 2 times 1, which is 24. The factorial of 5 is 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1, which is 120. So how to find the factorial? By using for and while, each one in a script. Now here the question is to take n from the user, so I should use input. However, guys, as I told you in the class, if I'm asking you to use input, you should use it after you make sure that your script is 100% correct and you do not have any error inside. Because assume that you have one error. Each time you are running the script, Matlab will ask you to enter n and then will give you this error. So you are consuming time here. So in order to decrease the time consumed, you can first assume any n, try your code, and then when your code is 100% correct without any errors, you can remove this input and then you can write input enter n that you wish to find its factorial. Okay, so guys, I hope that you have solved this problem in the correct way. Okay, first part is using for. Of course, I will clear all my values. You can use clear only, and then I will ask the user to enter n, and then I have defined in fact as 1 and not as 0. So guys, why I have to define in fact here as 1 and not as 0 as I did for the sum, if you remember? Because in fact the factorial is a multiplication. So if I'm defining in fact as 0 and then I'll be using this in fact to multiply with another number, then the answer will be always 0 because this is a multiplication. That's why in fact should be 1. And then I will use the for loop with a decrement of 1, which means an increment of -1 starting from n, which is the number that I wish to find its factorial, reaching 1. So once I reach 1, I should stop the multiplication because in fact factorial is n times n minus 1 times n minus 2 until 1. So that's why, guys, I will use for k going from n with a -1 until 1, and then n fact will be n fact times this k, which means if I need to try the script, k will start by n, which is, let's say, 4, and then n fact will be 1 times 4, and then k will be 3, and then n fact will be the old one, which is 4 times 3, and then 4 times 3 times 2, and then 4 times 3 times 2 times 1, and I will stop here. Of course, guys, I can do the same using k going from 1 with an increment of 1 until n, and you will have the same answer. Now here in this case, you are multiplying 1 by n, and then you are multiplying 1 by 1, and then 1 by 2, and then 2 by 3, and then 6 by 4 until you reach your n. So you will have the same answer. Please try it. What about the while loop? How to do it using while loop? Okay, so using while loop, it is the same as the previous one for 4, but of course I should decrement n inside the while loop, and the condition will be when n is greater than 1, and of course guys I should define in fact. So you can do it using while loop like this one, or you can convert this for loop اللي هي for case going from 1 till n into a while loop, and then the condition will be while k is less than 1, and I should define k as 1, and then I should do the multiplication. Of course guys, there is a built-in function called factorial, where you can only specify n as the input of this factorial, and you will have the output as 5 factorial or n factorial.